Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for joining us for the Naval War College Foundation's 6th Annual Newport Summer Symposium, Artificial Intelligence and its Impact on Defense. Today's presentation marks the second of a 3-event series titled Artificial Intelligence on the Front Lines. The Naval War College Foundation is proud to bring together military, government, academia, and private industry experts from around the country to speak to the uses of AI and the risk it presents to our national security, prosperity, and democratic way of life. On June 15th, 2021, during the Naval War College Foundation's annual San Francisco Symposium, we hosted the first presentation in our 3-event series, Artificial Intelligence and Digital Modernization for Future Leaders, where featured guest speakers, including the Honorable Bob Work and Naval War College Foundation esteemed faculty, Dr. Chris Demchek and Captain Mike O'Hara, discuss the burgeoning impacts of artificial intelligence on our leadership and national security. Next spring, the Naval War College Foundation will host the 3rd event of the series, Harnessing AI to Advance National Security. Here, we hope to outline for you what actions our nation must take to defend against the growing number of threats posed by AI and how we must act now collaboratively with our nation's allies and partners to develop innovative strategies, policies, concepts, and technologies to defend democracy in an era of accelerated artificial intelligence, competition, and conflict. I am George Lang, CEO of the Naval War College Foundation, and it is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you this morning. We are excited and gratified to see so many of you participating today virtually through our live stream platform. Of course, we had hoped to gather with many of you in person at the Naval Station Newport Officers Club, but in light of the recent developments related to COVID-19 and the Delta variant, and for the continued health and safety of our friends, guest speakers, and staff, we thought it best to present the symposium as a virtual-only live stream event. We apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused you. As many of you know, our Newport Summer Symposium has traditionally hosted 200 guests annually in Newport, the home of the U.S. Naval War College, to interact with faculty, staff, and distinguished speakers to address the many challenges in our national and international security environments. Today, aided by COVID-19 and the many advances in digitization it drove to sustain and in many cases establish communications, we are broadcasting today to nearly 400 members, guests, and friends who are dialing in from across the country. Thank you. Now, let me recognize the following donors for their exceptional support, sponsorship, and philanthropy of today's event, the proceeds of which will benefit the U.S. Naval War College and its accredited graduate-level programs, which are designed to prepare ethically minded military and civilian leaders to meet the strategic and operational challenges of today and tomorrow, including a broad spectrum of AI-related threats. At the commanding officer sponsorship level, $10,000 or more, Chairman Philip and Mrs. Patricia Bilden, Vice Chairman Dan and Mrs. Debbie Holland and Goldman Sachs and Company, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Foundation, Trustee Captain David and Mrs. Paula Hunter, and Trustee Dwight and Mrs. Susan Saprell. At the executive officer sponsorship level, $5,000, Trustee Emeritus Richard and Mrs. Barbara Bohan, Trustee Paul and Mrs. Ingrid Dimitrick, Trustee Waring and Mrs. Carmen Partridge and the Waring and Carmen Partridge Foundation, and Trustee Archbold and Mrs. Helene Van Buren and the Van Buren Charitable Foundation. We remain very grateful to these exceptional individuals and to all of our corporate donors, private philanthropists, trustees, members, and patriotic supporters, and for the Aletta Morris McBean Charitable Trust, the Colonel John A. and Eileen F. Carr Endowment Fund, and the William A. Obenchain Cyber and Innovation Endowment for making events such as this possible. For over 50 years, the Naval War College Foundation has relied on the generous support of its trustees, members, and donors to enhance and enrich the academic program and educational experience at the college by providing additional financial resources not readily available due to other defense and service-related funding priorities. Today, your contributions reinforce and sustain the prestige and excellence of the U.S. Naval War College and its vision to provide today's decision makers and tomorrow's leaders with educational experiences and learning opportunities that develop their ability to anticipate and prepare strategically for the future, strengthen the foundations of peace, and create a decisive warfighting advantage. Pressing forward the program, I introduce to you now our chairman, Philip Bilden, who will introduce our first guest speaker. Philip.
Thank you, Captain Lang, for your comments and your leadership in assembling an exceptionally relevant and timely program for our Naval War College Foundation. To all of our members, welcome, and thank you for making the time for this important presentation that continues our series of symposia focused on emerging national security threats in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. I'm Philip Bilden, and as chairman of the Naval War College Foundation, I am pleased and proud to report that we are leading from the front in this strategic initiative to build awareness for the challenge posed by artificial intelligence. It is a challenge that has been described as existential to our nation's continuity, our governance, and our economic prosperity. It matters. We are honored to have our esteemed keynote speaker, Lieutenant General Michael Gruen, and our outstanding panel of national security leaders and subject matter experts joining us today to address this rapidly evolving threat. Before I introduce General Gruen, allow me to comment on why the Naval War College Foundation is focused on this topic and convening our second symposium today. The Naval War College Foundation supports the most important national security priorities of the Department of Defense that are critical to the professional education of our senior officers at the Naval War College. Whether it is in AI, cyber, or the Arctic, we are funding initiatives that will impact our nation's future leaders who are entrusted with the strategic decisions affecting our security and stability. And unlike government funding, our support is at the speed of relevance. As an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization, the Foundation accelerates funding years before it is appropriated through government channels, if funds come at all through those channels. Our foundation does not stop working during government shutdowns or national pandemics. We are not hostage to partisan politics of budget appropriations. We provide reliable and forward-looking funding for the margin of excellence at the Naval War College that the government does not and oftentimes cannot provide. And we need your support. The Foundation has led from the front before at the speed of relevance, notably in cybersecurity education. Years before the term cyber was part of the national lexicon, we stood up the Cyber Task Force to build public awareness of the cyber threat. We convened a series of forums and supported war game simulations at the Naval War College here in Newport with civilian and military leaders and our esteemed and excellent faculty and staff. This multi-year process allowed the Foundation to raise awareness and, importantly, philanthropic funding to prepare our Naval War College future leaders to operate on air, land, sea, and space in the strategic context of the cyber domain. Anchored by a $10 million commitment and with generous support of our Board of Trustees, we established funding for the Admiral James R. Hogg Cyber and Innovation Policy Institute. And as a result, our future leaders at the Naval War College have a toolkit today to implement cyber operations into their strategic planning and calculus when commanding missions and units to secure tomorrow. The Foundation is moving out again at flank speed to build awareness and funding for another rapidly evolving national security threat in artificial intelligence. And today we are honored to learn from Lieutenant General Michael Gruen, one of the nation's senior-most leaders entrusted with the challenge, the awesome challenge of developing strategies for our joint forces, our Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, to incorporate AI into our multi-domain warfighting and business management operations. General Gruen is tasked with leading the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, known best by its acronym as the JAIC. The mission of the JAIC is to transform the DoD through AI, by accelerating the delivery and adoption of AI to achieve mission impact at scale. Now, while that mission statement sounds very simple, I will tell you it's exceptionally complex to implement across the vast operations of the Department of Defense and our deployed and deployable forces to, and I'll quote the General, change the way we decide, the way we fight, the way we manage, and the way we prepare our warfighters. We will hear from General Gruen on why we need to understand the impact of AI on the future of warfare, and why we need to foresee today what is foreseeable to help our leaders and our allies use AI as an essential enabler of warfighting advantage. After 3 decades of distinguished service in uniform, General Gruen assumed his current position as the director of the JAIC back in October of last year. He is a highly decorated Marine Corps officer with prior assignments of the National Security Agency and in senior leadership positions in the Joint Staff and in the Marine Corps. He served as the Deputy Chief of Computer Network Operations and as the J2 Director for Intelligence Joint Staff in direct support of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He also served as the Director of Marine Corps Intelligence. General Gruen has served in a variety of strategic, operational, ground, air, and naval units in Marine intelligence over his distinguished career. And in addition to his civilian degrees, General Gruen is a graduate of the Naval Postgraduate School, the Marine Corps Command and General Staff College, and, very importantly, the U.S. Naval War College class of 2008. We are honored to have a most distinguished Naval War College graduate lead our discussion here today. General, your example represents our motto of educate today, secure tomorrow. Thank you for your leadership in this critical mission and for supporting your Naval War College and nation yet again. We look forward to your briefing and panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will commence the second half of our presentation sharply at 12 p.m. During the break, you'll hear a brief recorded message from the Naval War College Foundation's Vice Chairman and Treasurer, Dan Holland. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dan Holland, Vice Chairman and Treasurer of the Naval War College Foundation, and I want to add my warm welcome and thank all of you for joining us today for our 6th annual Newport Summer Symposium, Artificial Intelligence and its Impact on Defense. Thank you, General Gruen, for your insightful presentation, framing this important topic and the urgent need for our defense efforts to dominate in the artificial intelligence domain. I'm looking forward to hearing our distinguished panelists debate these important ideas. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors of today's event and to thank all of our supporters. Your contributions enable our foundation to provide critical funding across many areas that allow the Naval War College to train our next generation of strategic thinkers, warfighters, and peacekeepers. This margin of excellence is crucial as we align our programming with the national security priorities of the Navy and of our nation. In the areas of artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, irregular warfighting, great power competition, space, the Arctic, and strategic deterrence. As treasurer, I'm proud to report that the Naval War College Foundation remains in strong financial condition. And through your generous contributions, we continue to provide millions of dollars of funding to the Naval War College to ensure that our defense community can meet all of the challenges of today and into the future. Thank you for your support and enjoy the rest of the program.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you the distinguished guest speakers in the next segment, Mr. Shah, our moderator for the panel discussion, and panelists Brigadier General Balan Ayyar, Jennifer Ewbank, and Chris Lynch. Shah is the managing partner of Shield Capital, an investment firm focused on technologies applicable to both the commercial and defense markets. He is also the chairman of Resilience Insurance, a startup powering new approaches to cyber insurance and security. Previously, he ran the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit Experimental DIUX, reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense. Raj led DIUX in its efforts to strengthen U.S. armed forces through contractual and cultural bridges between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon. Previous to that, Raj was Senior Director of Strategy at Palo Alto Networks, which acquired Morta Security, where he was CEO and co-founder. He began his business career as a consultant with McKinsey & Company. Raj serves as a reserve F-16 pilot in the U.S. Air Force and has completed multiple overseas combat deployments. He holds a bachelor's degree from Princeton University and an MBA from Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and is a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Welcome, Raj.
George.
General Ayer is a founder and CEO of percipient.ai, a Silicon Valley-based artificial intelligence firm providing machine learning and computer vision products for our nation's most demanding national security and intelligence missions. He is a seasoned CEO, a retired U.S. Air Force general officer, and in his last role in the profession of arms, the commanding general of Combined Joint Interagency Task Force 435 in combat in Afghanistan. He is a previous White House fellow and member of the Council on Foreign Relations. General Ayyar is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and holds graduate degrees in strategic studies, public administration, and industrial resource management. He was the first in his class to be selected for general officer in the United States Armed Forces. He is the recipient of several distinguished military awards, including the Legion of Merit, Defense Superior Service Medal and Bronze Star, as well as NAACP's Meritorious Service Award. Welcome, General Ayyar. Jennifer Ewbank is the Deputy Director of CIA for Digital Innovation, responsible for accelerating the development and integration of digital and cyber capabilities across all of CIA's mission areas, to include enterprise information technology, cyber operations and analysis, data strategy and artificial intelligence, open source collection and reporting, as well as building the digital acumen of the CIA workforce through training and education. A career federal government official, Jennifer has over 33 years of experience, initially as a Foreign Service Officer with the State Department and more recently with the CIA, primarily in the Directorate of Operations, where she has held key leadership positions and served as the bulk of her career in the field, to include 4 tours as Chief of Station. In one of Jennifer's previous leadership roles, she was responsible for the CIA's engagement with the U.S. private sector and academia. Jennifer was born and raised in Northern California and earned degrees in political science and French from the University of California, Berkeley. Welcome, Jennifer, and thank you for joining us today. Chris Lynch is a co-founder and the Chief Executive Officer at Rebellion Defense. Previously, he was founding director at Defense Digital Service. His team launched high-impact programs, including Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure, JEDI, Cloud, and Hack the Pentagon, and provided technical expertise on the Department of Defense's most critical technological challenges, including the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter and next-generation GPS operational control system. Chris is a serial entrepreneur from Seattle, where he founded venture-backed startups and led engineering teams at enterprise companies. Notably, he was also an early member of the United States Digital Service. Chris is presently a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and serves as a board member of the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, where he advocates for innovation in the defense industry. Chris is currently a fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center, working with former Secretary of Defense Ash Carter on ensuring new technology serves a public purpose and good. He is also a regular lecturer at Stanford's Computer Science Department, where he encourages nerds or techies to serve in government. Welcome, Chris. These experts in the field of AI will be joined by Lieutenant General Gruen, who was introduced earlier in the program. Raj, over to you.
Thanks, George, and want to thank you and Philip and the Naval War College Foundation for putting this together. As General Gruen described AI is going to be critical to our national security and the battlefields of the future, and the interaction of commercial technology and innovation and how they collaborate will define our success. So pleased that we have two current government leaders and we have two former government leaders who are now leading as entrepreneurs these companies developing this technology. So for today, what I want to do is really focus on three things. One is the people and process, right, of how we're doing commercial engagement. Two, talk about scale. How do we take the great experiments that everyone on this panel has helped with and get to scale? And then thirdly, some of the technology. So to get right into it, though, I'd love each of our panelists to just briefly share their own journey into AI, right? No one started off as an AI technologist or leader, but they all are now. Would love to hear what brought you to this and your focus. Chris, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm a nerd. I'm a software engineer by trade. I grew up writing software for most of my life. So it's been an interesting journey, and looking at how technology changes quite a bit. I'd say that the reason that AI is important and why you see so much of what we're doing here at Rebellion, and also a lot of the work that you would look at that we did over at Defense Digital Service during my time at the Pentagon, it's around this idea of how do we think about the tremendous change that is underway, right? I think a lot about coming from an industrial manufacturing era into a software and technology-driven era. And you think about what is that going to take? What are the things that are going to be really important? Because we're now dealing with, in some cases, problems that are beyond human scale, right? And when you think about problems that are beyond human scale, it makes you think about, okay, well, what's the foundation of that? When you look at things like Jedi, cloud, or you look at the work that my team at DDS did around DevOps and DevSecOps and setting the foundations for that. Why are those things so important? It's because they put a foundation for continuously being able to deploy technology at a scale that is greater than human beings themselves can do manually. And so AI and machine learning, computer vision, and all these things that we talk about, these fantastical terms, they're really a way of helping us let computers do what they're really good at. And I think about this a lot, that we're surrounded by sort of ambient artificial intelligence in our day-to-day lives. You charge your phone at the end of the day, and it's going through all your photos, and it's identifying your pet or identifying family members and friends. It isn't that you couldn't do those things. It's just that it's probably a lot of work to stay on top of it. So why don't we have those things show up in the mission of defense and national security? And so that's what drives me, is how do we let computers do what they're really good at so that we can let human beings do what they are exceptional at, not the other way around.
Great, thanks, Chris. And we'll go over to Jennifer next. What led you to take your current role?
Yeah, thank you very much, Raj. As George outlined earlier, so I come to this through a slightly different path. I am not a techie by background. I'm a failed techie, started as an engineering student at university and ended up as a poli-sci grad. But that said, just always been fascinated with technologies and their interrelation with policy. And so when I was asked to take the position, and I think as George mentioned earlier, I've spent most of my career, almost 34 years living abroad, both in the Foreign Service and now with CIA. When I came to this role, and when former Director Haspel asked me to take this position, candidly, I thought I came with a bit of a digital deficit, thinking, what role am I going to play? And it didn't take me very long to realize that there was a really, really important role to be played by let's say the user, the customer, the mission-focused piece of whatever organization you're in. Because we've got fantastic technologists, great enthusiastic innovators, and a lot of great work being done. But as General Gruen said, occasionally just the shiny objects come into play. And so my focus has really been about ensuring that the innovation that we are focused on today is bringing direct benefit to mission problems today, and that we're building a solid foundation for the higher order AI capabilities in the future. So making sure that our investments are made wisely, in a synchronized way, or at least an incremental way to get towards those grander goals in the future where the shiny objects become the norm. And so that's how I kind of fell into this role. And I've been thrilled and delighted to come to work each day and learn something new now for a few years.
Thanks, Jennifer. And we're glad you did that. The nation thanks you. Balan, over to you. Why did you start your current company?
Thanks, Raj, and thanks to the Naval War College. Somehow I escaped the beauty of Norfolk during my wonderful years in service. I got sent to Washington, D.C. to ICAF for punishment in 2003, but now I know what an amazing institution. Of course, I've always known about it, but congrats to everyone for bringing this discussion together. And thank you, Raj and George, for letting me participate. And thanks to the other panelists and General Gruen. And Raj, for me, I think, George may have mentioned that in my last role in the profession, I was in Afghanistan 2012 and 2013. And prior to that, in 2010, I was leading the Air Force Recruiting Service. That was my first real understanding, having led primarily operations up to that point, about how poorly the department and the Air Force in particular was doing with data, touching hundreds of thousands of young men and women around the country. We couldn't tell you the next week who we'd spoken to and for what purpose. So I knew that we had challenges with data. But when I went to Afghanistan, as I think a number of attacks took place there while I was deputy commander and then commander of that wonderful task force. And I knew watching all of that unfold in an environment where we had air and space supremacy, enormous amounts of data flowing. If at all possible to protect our forces, we should have been able to understand the world around us in order to do that. And we just weren't capable of it. We had more data flowing than could possibly be understood by our intelligence analysts and operators. And I knew getting these briefs after each attack with almost perfect intelligence that we just weren't, there's no way we could grow the number of human analysts in 2012 and 2013 out of the problem that we were going to be facing. And I also sensed even then, if you can believe it, that our adversaries knew that this kind of new global commons of data, the amount of data flowing, made it possible for them to hide almost in plain sight, particularly in the visual environment. So very personal, very deep. I thought someday that we would be able to bring together human and machine teaming around intelligence analysis and operations to do what General Gruen described, which is ultimately conflict and war, especially, is a very human endeavor. How do we let our intelligence and national security professionals have as much understanding as might be possible, as Chris described, with machine intelligence doing what it can foundationally to help them understand the environment and to do things that humans really aren't inclined toward or naturally gifted at, looking at massive amounts of indicators to determine patterns and anomalies so that a human who's got brilliant powers of contextualization and training can better understand and be more decisive and precise when they're protecting our shared values. So for me, just this realization I came to when I left Afghanistan, that it was incontrovertible that human and machine teaming and these technologies would allow us, to help our brilliant men and women in uniform and in the intelligence community, move our nation forward in a very difficult environment where data was just flowing with such rapidity and veracity and volatility that without some help from machine intelligence, I knew that we couldn't stay ahead of our adversaries. So that's kind of my story and why I went out and pitched in the venture capital world to build our firm.
The next point, I'd like to go to Jennifer. And you're working at a unique agency with a unique role where your mission is to provide timely intelligence to both warfighters on the ground as well as our most senior leadership in the nation. Can you talk a little bit about how the CIA is using AI and machine learning to affect that mission?
Yeah, thank you very much, Raj. Maybe I'll start. I'll try to keep it brief, but I'll start with a little bit of a background, at least on how this kind of changing digital landscape is really changing the business of intelligence. We're maybe a little different on this panel than my colleagues in the military and former military officers on industry. Fundamentally, for us, it's really all about the explosion, this exponential increase in the volume of data, which is just transforming almost everything we do. And it's I guess it would have parallels ways transforming our economy as a whole. And so for those who don't follow these things as closely, maybe some of our guests today, the scale, as you mentioned earlier, Raj, the scale is just almost mind-bending. And so we think about 90% of all the world's information and data created in just the past 2 years. And so for an intelligence organization whose job is to understand stuff, that is really a big challenge. So we have to figure out how we master the collection, the movement, the processing, the storage, the analysis of all of these disparate kinds of data and other information, information from people's minds, as well as data from sensors all around the world, and bringing that all together and integrating it and being able to extract new and unique and powerful insights from it. We also need to study how our adversaries are using data against us. And General Gruen spoke a little bit about that. He mentioned that in his prior role at NSA. And we want to understand that so that we can help protect the American public. And one thing that doesn't get spoken about very often in this space, but for CIA, it is really critical. While we're doing all of this, while we're trying to exploit new capabilities in artificial intelligence, we really are thinking about how do we uphold our own values as a nation? And how do we ensure that whatever we do is done with the rights of American citizens foremost in our minds? So, for us, it's just like any other organization. We have the same kind of journey, right? Moving from our legacy systems to cloud architecture, et cetera. I mean, everyone knows those steps are. But in terms of the cultural piece that's been mentioned a couple of times, that is huge for us. So how do we build, not only just bring in great technological minds who are enthusiastic, but like how do we build an AI-ready workforce itself? People who haven't. So I'm a child of early 60s, right? And so I didn't come into this organization or the State Department earlier with that kind of background. So how do we create kind of an AI-ready workforce? How do we do that while staying ahead of the everyday global crises, which we see on the news all the time? And how do we recruit and retain the best technology talent? We see companies on this panel, right? I'm going to guess that we cannot match the financial incentives that some of these amazing companies can offer. But what we do offer is just an incredibly compelling mission, and being able to come to work every day and feel that you are doing something to protect your fellow citizens is really powerful. So to kind of get ahead of this, or at least to get our hands around this transformation in the digital environment, that was fundamentally why we created CIA's newest directorate, and that was the directorate that I head, which is Directorate of Digital Innovation. It was at least part of our strategy. And our AI strategy is simple and kind of known to anyone who runs a big organization and is trying to leverage this. It's fundamentally having an AI-ready workforce, as I mentioned. That workforce for us needs to be driving conversation about how we shape and integrate AI and ML solutions into our operations, into our analysis, and into the not very sexy but important business functions of running a huge organization. And how do we create the technical environment for AI solutions to flourish? Not, as General Gruen said, 1,000 wildflowers, but really a garden, a curated garden that will flourish. And that's everything from the architecture to the software applications, but it's also culturally our approach to innovation. And again, in the not very sexy category, but we are a big government organization. We have to think about policies and regulations and data management and contracts, as one of my fellow panel members mentioned. And all of this with kind of an underpinning of ethics in the use of AI. Last thing I'll mention on that is really the critical nature of maximizing partnerships. The scale is such that none of us can do this alone. We can master AI alone. We need to work with industry, with academia, with our other government agencies, our military partners. And for CIA, we have a unique responsibility to work with our foreign government partners all around the world, looking to leverage the best in breed capabilities that will help us defend our shared values. And And so maybe I'll just take one quick moment and talk about that role with the warfighter. And CIA, I think most people know at this point that we have a very long and I would say honorable tradition of working very closely with the warfighter side by side. We have our roots as an organization in World War II and the OSS. And if every day when I walk into our building through the lobby, there's a statue of General Donovan right across from our wall of honor where we recognize and we remember our officers who have fallen in the line of duty. And so we know and we feel that partnership is critical. We cooperate on the ground, on the battlefield. I think certainly people know a lot about that in this post 9/11 era. But if I kind of back up a little bit, I would say more generally, we do focus our support to the warfighter through intelligence collection and all source analysis on our adversaries' plans, intentions, capabilities, you name it. And fundamentally, AI helps us do that a lot more effectively. And with the warfighter and with our military partners, there is a great deal of engagement between the U.S. intelligence community broadly, which includes the CIA, and the Department of Defense all around these kind of various AI advances. The CIA is devoting time and energy to reporting on how AI is shaping our adversaries' wartime strategies. It's really important context for the warfighter and for military planners. We produce assessments on the maturity, the capabilities, vulnerabilities in our adversaries' AI-enabled weapon systems, which is an important piece of the puzzle for us. We also collect, analyze, and disseminate reporting on adversaries' AI use at the tactical level during wartime, which we hope will help warfighters. Hopefully we avoid the wars, but when we need it, we'll have that. And we're working very closely with military counterparts where we're coordinating AI research and development and are both looking fundamentally for the rapid adoption of commercial AI innovations into military and intelligence applications. I'll leave it there, but thanks for the question, Raj.
Well, great. Thanks, Jennifer. I think you highlight an important point, and one that General Gruen also made, which is around organization and innovation. It's this implementation, right? Not necessarily a technology issue. And we have large organizations that you have to move. And I think the world is so much different than when it was 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, when the idea of a young company or startup working with the department. I mean, now we have two very senior leaders in the Pentagon now and in the CIA, running organizations designed to bring innovation to bear, particularly on AI. So I guess what I'd love to do now is take that and talk to our two entrepreneurs and CEOs and say, there's always the concern or historical concern around the valley of death, and how do you work with the government as a young company? And you two have done it successfully, and your companies have. Give us the unvarnished view. Like, what's working and what's not working? Chris and Balan.
Balan, you want to go first?
Well, yeah, thank you. Just how much time do we have, Raj? No, I'm kidding. Listen, it's great. Thanks, Raj. Obviously, feel there's a lot to unpack with even Jennifer's, thoughts and with General Gruen's. But, let me just say, it takes tenacity and technical excellence and mission focus. I thinking differently about these problems. I don't really talk about AI. Warfighters don't buy AI. They buy software that helps them win. Intelligence analysts don't care that it's powered by gremlins or quantum or blockchain or AI. They want to know if the software helps them win, helps them understand the world ahead of their adversaries. They know, as Jennifer and General Gruen described, that our adversaries are actively operationalizing capabilities in their software, harnessing the power of their private sector information, knowledge, and companies, and using artificial intelligence as best they can with the advent of deep nets and compute power to understand the world ahead of us. It's just that simple. So at the end of the day, as a venture-backed firm, I got to convince my venture investors that this valley of death you're talking about is not something to be worried about. If our software is the best in the world at helping them win, there's almost unlimited budget available for us. Nobody has. Listen, if I'm competing for the very narrow slice of innovation money that Jennifer has set aside or that General Gruen has set aside, there's no hope in getting the venture flow trillions of dollars of venture flow in private sector innovation economy in the United States focused on national security and intelligence. We have to build software that Jennifer and General Gruen and other people can't live without. And when we do, forget about the valley of death. They'll be rushing toward us to figure out how they can negotiate to an advantage. These are the smartest people. People talk about the valley of death like the folks in government aren't very smart about, how to buy things that they love. Let me tell you, you can't be in their way. If they find something that they love, that they need to help them win, they will move heaven and earth, I guarantee you. So the real question is not on the government on figuring out this valley of death. It's on whether we're mission tuning commercial software so that an operator in the field, at the edge, or whatever it is market you're talking about, feels like the power that your software is now giving them is so exceptional that they can't live without it. Let me tell you, Jennifer's a warfighter too in her own light, and of course General Gruen is, and you want to get in the way of one of those operators, forget about it. Everybody falls in line once they see the software and the capabilities that we think now we can present. The question for private sector is, do you have the tenacity, the technical excellence? This is not a B2C or B2B. You build a new dance app and you get your 1,000 subscribers in the first day and 10,000 the second day. This is hardcore. They want you to mission tune your software to make sure that they can win. And of course, these are the most consequential missions on earth. People's lives in some cases are at stake. So it's not an easy environment. In some ways, I like to think of the adversity as a competitive advantage. The fact that I'm willing to go through this grueling process to prove and validate our software, when many other commercial firms would have, had 5 or 6 decisions in the time it takes the government to make one sales cycle. But what I tell my venture-backed investors is, listen, we have to believe that what we're working on is so important to our nation, Western nation's success. And let me just give you a hint. I believe that the brand value from the intelligence community and from the armed services, but broadly the Department of Defense, is so high, is so valuable. If you're successful there, there's not a single commercial market that your software may be relevant to that you can't dominate. So that's my pitch. My investors have believed it. We got a long, hard slog. I don't talk about the valley of death with them, kind of wringing my hands. Oh my God. They want to know whether our software helps these intelligence analysts make better decisions. Turns out the visual, I call it, visual intelligence platform that Mirage has become is quite adept. And we'll talk about it potentially later, but right away when you're watching your customers, your software, whether or not you're helping them win. There's just no question when they can contextualize faster that they know that they've got something that can help them win. So I think what we got to focus on is not on the valley of death, although there's no question you got a couple experts at this, the processes, the culture. There's 10 books written on how difficult adoption is. I think this leadership team and the DoD's leadership team knows there's a bit of a crisis unfolding with the amount of data and our ability to stay ahead of it and our ability for our young Marines to understand the geography of the fight and inside the fight, whether or not they have the information to be more precise and decisive when lives are in harm's way. We know that's valuable. So the question is whether we can build it. I think adopting commercial capabilities in AI is wise. They have to be mission tuned to help we shouldn't buy it because there's AI. We should buy it because it helps them win. So I'm not too focused on it, Raj. Do I complain occasionally on Friday afternoons over a beer about how long it takes and how difficult it is for them to get the color of money and the contract vehicle? Oh my God, it's just unbelievable. Now, turns out JSOC, thankfully can use some additional authorities. Jennifer has extraordinary authorities. She's being very modest, but the intelligence community has extraordinary authorities. If you build something that they believe will help them win, there's no valley of death. There's a valley of joy. So you just got to put your heart and soul and believe that, and you got to build great capabilities harnessed by the power of AI. And by the way, the harnessing by the power of AI, I'm just doing that because we have the commander, essentially the leader of the free world's artificial intelligence efforts on. Now, because artificial intelligence does have some transparency and ethical boundaries that we want to abide by, it is an important discussion when you deliver capabilities that they know how and why Mirage, in our case, was able to come to those recommendations. But that is not why they're buying it. I'm telling you, they're buying it because you built something that helps them win. Let me stop there. Thanks, Raj. Sorry about that. I got a little carried away with my position, but thanks. Over to Chris. Chris,
I love it. All right, Chris.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna. Balan said it perfectly, but I'm gonna hit a different way to look at this. The answer of how to overcome the valley of death is actually sitting in the hands of everybody who's listening to this right now. It's actually going to fall to you. See, I think that this is a question about courage, disruption, and about the amazing ability to bridge where we are today to where we know that we need to go in a great power competition era, right? I think a lot about that. And all these things that we spend our time talking about, things like acquisition, how do we buy, color of money, what does that even mean, right? To the world outside of the government, nobody even knows what color of money means. Palm cycles, all these things, they are totally unimportant. And so the question is, how do we have the courage, the tenacity to do a couple things? And I think about 4 really big things that are going to enable the shift that is going to make this happen, right? For the general to be successful at bringing artificial intelligence into the operations, into the mission, into the heart of the things that we're doing. What is going to make that happen, right? It's going to take experiments. It's going to take disruption. And by disruption, I want to be very clear. Please, when you leave this call, don't talk about innovation. Don't talk about innovation. I never use that word. Use the word disruption. Why? Because we want to look at the things that didn't work before, and we want to disrupt them. We want to change them. We want to get rid of them. We want to rethink how they're done. And we want to go into a new era with new technologies and new ways of thinking. So let's disrupt those things. We're going to do it by bringing incredible experiments in. We're going to have failures. There's one thing that everybody who starts a company will tell you. It's about what you learned from failures. Have the experience to quickly shift around. Don't be so married to the things that happened the day before that we can't change our thinking about where we're going tomorrow. Allow for those failures and allow for that ambiguous environment to lead us to things, to give us the courage, the tenacity to actually move forward with important solutions. There's something that the general said around finding problems that are going to be impactful, right? Going after the way that we think about the problems that we want to focus these technologies on. I would encourage everybody here, as you're thinking about things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, computer vision, all these fantastical concepts, right? Find small problems that become building blocks to big solutions and outcomes that people care about. It's a very practical thing. Take a big problem, right? The general was talking about, what do we do in the South China Sea? Things like that. Break it down into something that by itself is small enough that we could actually have an experiment to see how these technologies could change our world there. Find successes that give us the courage to start having other successes or failures to quickly move around and shift our thinking around how we're using these technologies. And so when I think about how the valley of death will be overcome, part of it will be about, of course, working with companies like Percipient or Rebellion, right? Those are the types of things that's why we started these companies, because we believe that we need to bring new people who are incredible software engineers and mathematicians and some of the best people in the entire world. We need to bring them into the mission to work alongside you, right? Bring those people into this environment. But we need to make sure that we're focused on the problems that are going to have an impact, and we need to remove all these barriers as excuses for why we can't do it. Like all the stuff that we talk about for acquisition and all that, that should be around how we think about, hey, how do I get to the mission outcomes that Balan was just talking about? I think a lot about that. It is the most important mission in the entire world. I find it absolutely unbelievable that we are in a place where venture capital predominantly does not invest in the mission of defense and national security. It is a fact today that we do not have enough venture capital going into this area. Why? Because they think that it's hard. So I go back to how I started this answer. How are we going to overcome the valley of death? It's you. It's the people who are listening today. When you walk out of here, it's going to take disruption, experiments. It's going to take a little bit of ambiguity. It's going to take some failures. It's going to take some courage for us to take risks on things that we didn't believe we understood enough, that we learned from them. And I'm not talking about being careless. Please don't ever mischaracterize what I'm saying here as saying that this should be about being careless in our experimentations. That's not it at all. It's about being calculated, thoughtful, and taking experiments and then finding the successes. But it's going to be up to you. It's going to be up to the people who are listening. And I want to be there with you. That's why we're here. That's why we bring incredible people into this mission. I think it's the most important thing in the world. I think that the security of being able to walk down the street and have that security that each and every one of us feel, well, we know what it's like when it's not there. And that's a sad and scary place. And so I think that it's up to us together to bridge that gap and to bring technology in, especially in the great power competition era. Because I think that also we have some adversaries who don't happen to suck at this, right? They're actually pretty good. I wish that that wasn't the case. But we've got authoritarian capitalistic regimes who are actually pretty good at some of this stuff. And we need to think very carefully about how we're going to do some of this disruption that I'm talking about. So that's how I think about it. I think it's going to be up to the people here, and it's going to be up to people like Balan, myself, and many others, and Raj, who's investing in this, to bring in a new era of the software era of defense and technology and hardware in a different way than we had it in the industrial era before us.
Well, thanks, Chris, both you and Balan. I mean, it's just, you love to see this energy, right? And this ecosystem. And I kind of knew what both of you guys would say. And I think it's a message to everyone out there that there is a willingness of people, of really smart people that are passionate to support this. But it'll take a coalition of the willing.
Before you go on, can I add one thing to what General Gruen shared? I think it may be worth you unpacking a touch. I think, of course, individual productivity from an app store environment and unified command and control of our data is exceptional. But one of the things that's really most special about the advent of these deep nets and artificial intelligence, even in our platform with automatic learning into detectors and models, is the development of enterprise intelligence over time. You know, when the senior person on China or Russia leaves one of these organizations, there's a massive gap of understanding. We end up contracting as often as we can back with them in some cases to get kind of a sense of understanding that they had in their mind that the enterprise intelligence wasn't developing in the agency itself. So one of the reasons we have to do more than 1,000 wildflowers of individual stovepipe success is, you know, the enterprise needs to continue to be learning and adapting from the work that these individual operators and analysts is doing. And AI enables that beautifully. Well-crafted, well-designed, mission-tuned AI allows an operator in Northcom and EUCOM to be learning as other people contribute to the body of knowledge. The AI helps elevate and accelerate everyone's understanding over time. So this is such a critical. Enterprise intelligence is the key differentiator for us a dozen years from now, how quickly we've continued to adapt to the new sensors, to the amount of data, and to the environment our adversaries are operating in depends on enterprise intelligence. And that only comes from the power that we get from now artificial intelligence. Anyway, thank you.
That's great. No, that's great. So we've got about, I think, 14 minutes left. So we're going to go into a little bit faster pace of questions. And so I only have 4 more questions that I want to get through, and I'm going to ask all 4 of you to opine. The first 2 around technology. Let's move the conversation to technology. And I'd love to understand from where you sit, what do you think is the most exciting technical or technology advancement that you predict will happen in the next 10 years? And what is the biggest threat, adversary threat, that you worry about that you think we'll see over the next 10 years in the context of AI? Maybe we'll start with Jennifer with that question.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll take a rather simplistic approach to this. I think in terms of what excites us, we're an organization with an almost uniquely diverse set of roles. Everything from a calligrapher to people who want to fly satellites, right? So, and everything in between. And so, virtually any new types of emerging AI technologies are of real interest, excitement for us. So we've talked a bit about some of those, we've touched on them, but just for us, again, as a organization projected overseas, AI-enabled human language technologies are really, really important for us. And all of these things that I might mention are really because we want to take the burden off of our specialists and allow them to focus their time on higher order cognitive functions and use the machines to work through a lot of this. So human language technology is super important for us. Natural language processing techniques are also really important for us. They allow us to kind of comb through these vast volumes of data and prepare kind of machine generated summaries and areas to focus on. Really important for us. Computer vision is, you mentioned it in passing, but something that is important for us when we're applying that to volumes of open source information and, well, because we are the CIA, not so open source information, and both video and imagery, it's critical for us to be able to manage the volume. Anomaly detection, object detection, pattern recognition, those things I think have real relevance in the intelligence world and in the military sphere. And for us, we also need to use all of these techniques to better understand this kind of ubiquitous sensing environment that is present all around the world and allow us to kind of adapt what is our very special mission to what is a uniquely challenging technical environment. We're also really looking at the technologies to help us identify things like deep fakes, things like fabricated media, as our adversaries around the world try to manipulate American public opinion and essentially undermine our democracy. And so those are the things we're interested in. And in terms of kind of threats, very quickly, and it's been touched upon, but I can summarize it in 2 words, China and Russia. And China being at the leading edge innovation or development in this sphere. And it's funny, General Gruen used a phrase that I use frequently. You feel the hot breath of their work on your neck. And it's the thing that is driving us every single day. And it's this whole of nation commitment to achieving AI dominance by 2030. Underpinned by the Made in China plan of 2025 and getting all the building blocks, just as we've talked about even in AI. This whole of government approach that uses political, military, economic, and soft power is frankly very effective. And so if I had a desire, it would be to do whatever we can to ensure that we have a similar, let's say, whole of nation approach. Close partnerships between industry and government, intelligence and warfighters to ensure that we can develop the abilities we need to counter our adversaries, hopefully not meet them on the battlefield, but when we do, win, and do it in a way that will kind of best protect our fellow citizens. So those are the kinds of things that I tend to focus on. I'll leave it there. My
Great.
Colleagues have a chance to chat.
Thank you. We'll go across the line. Balan, opportunities and risks.
Yeah, thanks. I think, it's just really all very interesting to me, but I would say that what we're in some ways, Raj, in right now is what we all saw happening around us is the acceleration of understanding. And, a little bit like gravity existed before Newton described it, what we're realizing now, and the fact that he was able to describe it didn't change it. Fundamentally, you're still walking on the ground, even if you didn't believe in gravity, right? And so in the same way, we're able to now, the acceleration that these deep nets have provided us in understanding in the visual environment for us in the visual intelligence business is just extraordinary. But really, we're able to now see deeper into history and recognize more clearly what's happening around us in a way that machines can augment and accelerate, our understanding. And what for me is really just a wonderful experience every time I see someone using the software to accomplish a mission, there's a certain moment at which they feel their cognitive level is really stimulated and excited. There's kind of an aha moment where, how is it possible? I just looked through thousands of hours of data to find a correlation. And so what we're excited about are these ability to understand the world more deeply is now available to us. And how could we turn away from that? And how it's so obvious to us now that if the adversary has these capabilities and we don't. So what can we do together to build capabilities that we believe are just extraordinary, that will help us, stay ahead of our adversaries and be able to kind of understand the world as precisely and decisively as we can. So I think, for me, this is in some ways not new at all. Humans have been working with machines since the beginning of the first machine, but the pace of acceleration in our capabilities with compute and now with the advent of these deep nets has made it necessary for us to rethink our infrastructure, our sensors, and our decision-making to incorporate our machine intelligence at a very foundational and nascent level. It's very narrowly tailored AI. We have to engineer around it to really elevate our operators and analysts. But it's very exciting. I think, listen, you've heard about China. There's just no question that there's two very different visions of the world unfolding in this century. And if we want our values and Western liberal values to prevail, we have to incorporate and understand how machine intelligence can work beautifully with human intelligence in a way that protects and strengthens our values. And it doesn't take much when you go on TV to see that other nations who don't have our values could use these technologies in a way that helps them both control their own people and influence the region they operate in. And the question is whether or not, as our two government leaders here have shared, whether or not we're going to be in a position to protect our values and our way of life in the coming decades if we don't take this urgency. I believe we're in kind of a COVID-19 environment that the government should act more aggressively to show conviction and to de-risk fantastic venture flows into this space and capabilities into this space. I feel like if we had the same sense of urgency against the importance of these capabilities powered by AI being integrated and taken to scale that we had for COVID-19, we'd be in a totally different conversation right now. We wouldn't be talking about the valley of death, which I kind of turn around to call, after a lot of adversity, the valley of joy. We would be racing, the venture capital would be racing to the opportunity. But we just haven't got that yet. We haven't got that sense. I'm worried that something will happen with China or potentially one of our other transnational actors where they've harnessed this power and had the advantage in a key moment that we could have prevented potentially the loss of life if we don't work quickly. But let's see. I mean, these kinds of conversations help promote the sense of urgency we need about the integration of these kinds of technologies into capabilities that'll help us, defend against those potential threats. But thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Balan.
I'll be fast here. When I think about the advancement, we should always assume that everybody's going to move much faster than we expect. When we think about the next 10 years, go back 10 years ago, nobody's good at predicting technology. But there is one thing that I think we can all count on. And that is the ubiquity of sensors and information that will far surpass almost anything that we consider to be exquisite or controlled today. Commercial infrastructure will likely be better or more ubiquitous in almost every area of reconnaissance, surveillance, and in sort of understanding what's happening on a threat environment than anything that we have, no matter how much we have invested in it. I think you can pretty much count on that. The sad part about that, and this is the threat, our adversaries will also have that. So in that environment, what is going to create new ways that we are going to be able to use and harness technology to see, understand, and decide and act before our adversaries do? And I think Jennifer talked a lot about this, but I truly see this as software is going to eat defense alive over the next 10 years. So all the things that we think about, software is going to drive the flawless execution of our mission and the mission of defense, protecting our nation, protecting our allies. Software is going to eat it alive, and it's going to change the dynamics of how we think about running almost every mission, and it's going to change how we think about what our adversaries understand and what we understand.
And this goes to what Chris's point, which is if we're going to make this change that we all want, it's the folks on the call that will be the ones driving it. If you could recommend one book, one topic, one thing that our participants should be studying or reading to get smart and prepared, what would you suggest to them?
Well, I like this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which I just reread again. I think it's a great way to think about how to not be caught in you kind of paradigms that you've grown up in the face of this kind of increasing speed of technology. Gladwell, of course, is wonderful. And then there's a great set of books on AI broadly that I think most of the panelists have probably looked at and the problems with adoption in human and machine teaming, which are probably worth reviewing. Thanks.
I'd have two topics that I think that people should become really smart on, because I think that they're not books, but you should understand why APIs are really important, how APIs have driven commercial software adoption and technology and have allowed companies to have interoperable software and exchange data freely across everything from financial markets to almost every other thing. And then I would certainly try to spend a lot of time understanding what infrastructure and platform and software as a service are, and why those things have received the majority of investment and how they change the dynamics of software.
Thanks, Chris. Last word to you, Jennifer.
Thanks. Yeah, those are all great recommendations, and I'll maybe take a slightly different spin on this, given my own background. For those who really want to feel the motivation to move with urgency and determination, I would recommend spending some time reading the foreign press. Read what our adversaries are actually saying. There are no secrets in this space. We know what the plans are. We know what their commitments are. We know what resources they're devoting to developing AI, essentially to supplant us as the lead world global power. And so I would just suggest that. Spend a little time reading, if you need to, translations, of course, of Chinese media, Russian media, and others.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all our panelists. Thanks so much for the wonderful insights and comments. Over to you, George, to wrap it up.
Raj, many thanks to you and all of our expert panelists, General Gruen, General Ayer, Jennifer Ewbank, Chris Lynch, and of course, Raj Shah. This was truly a remarkable presentation that I trust served to inform all of our guests of the challenges of AI and what our nation must do now to mitigate the risks of AI for our national security. Many thanks again to all of you for such a powerful presentation. And on behalf of Chairman Bilden and the Naval War College Foundation Board of Trustees, I'm proud to present each of you with this handsome Naval War College Foundation placard. Of Coast Harbor Island, it's home to the U.S. Naval War College. It's nestled on the banks of the Narragansett Bay here in beautiful Rhode Island, of course, where we've got a hurricane bearing down on us, but as a memento for your participation today. So thank you very much for your time. And of course, we know that you are very busy. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this year's annual Newport Summer Symposium and the second presentation in a 3-event series designed to inform and raise awareness of the challenges and threats of artificial intelligence to our national security. Stay tuned for the third presentation next spring. Details will be available online at our website at nwcfoundation.org. Please know that your continued support for and trust in the foundation represents an investment not only in the Naval War College, but in our great nation's national security. Through your generosity, we can ensure the U.S. Naval War College remains a globally recognized institution of higher learning that delivers excellence in education, research, and outreach required to address the many issues and concerns in contemporary strategic and operational environments, including AI and machine learning, cyber, and space. Finally, be sure to follow the Naval War College Foundation on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn as we work to build our base of membership and grow our great organization nationally. And for all those members and guests who participate regularly in our Patriots auction, our current auction will close at noon tomorrow. So be sure to get your bid in on some of your favorite items. Thank you again for our guest speakers. Thank you for joining us, for all of our friends and supporters and sponsors, and farewell for now.
I'm the retired Chief Executive Officer of the Bank of America. I've had a few achievements, but being a trustee of the War College Foundation ranks right up there. I often thought when I was running the Bank of America, and we had, at that time, I think 88,000 people in 36 countries around the world, as much responsibility as I had then as CEO, it was not as much responsibility as being the officer of the deck underway, steaming 750 yards from another ship in dock and ship conditions. That Navy experience gave me the confidence that, running 80,000 people in 36 countries is really not all that hard. So many of us, and I'll certainly count Barbara and myself among those, have been extremely lucky, and now it's time to give back. The U.S. Naval War College is a national treasure. It trains not just Navy officers or military officers. It trains civilian groups who would be appropriate. The first responders in the New York City area after 9/11, went to war games at the War College. Where else could they have gotten so quickly the ability to rebuild their command staff than out of the games taught by the War College?
We really had no idea about the losses that the New York Fire Department took. The fire department led from the front. Their senior officers did not sit on the curb with a walkie-talkie. Many times they went right up with their own firefighters. So when the floor went out from under them, basically not only did they lose firefighters, but in particular they lost senior leadership. At the U.S. Naval War College, we introduced them to and helped them think about the range of problems that they could well face. It may not be an airplane crashing into a building like this again, but it may be bacteria, or it may be a dirty nuclear device, or it may be a real nuclear device. How are we going to respond to this? And just work it right up and then game it, and then work it and then game it, and work it and game it. War games are just a superb teaching tool. That's what we introduced them to and enabled them to start doing, which they quickly, of course, began doing for themselves.
Commander Antoinette Weems-Gorman from the Jamaica Defense Force Coast Guard. Attending the U.S. Naval War College is considered a critical course for us to do in order to progress into senior command. The most important part of the experience is really the interaction with so many different professionals in maritime environment and from different countries, different cultures. It has assisted me in conducting operations. So you know someone that is on the other end of the phone, or the person who you're emailing, you have common ground, and the history of being here together, so you can talk about it freely, what the issue is, and solve it.
Money that we've given to the War College we feel good about. I think that War College is more effective in ensuring America's place in the world than the State Department is. I think what goes on in the War College, I think that's terribly valuable to the stability of America's position in the world.